It's strange how you can walk into your kitchen and feel your chest split open. She was there in my old t-shirt, sitting too close to that smug-looking guy whose laugh scraped across my nerves. Her hand rested on the table, almost touching his. The smell of fresh coffee made me nauseous. My pulse hammered so hard I thought I'd black out. I wanted to shout, to grab something, to drag him out by the collar. But all I did was stand there, feeling everything I'd built with her crack and crumble in an instant. That wasn't the first sign. If I'm being honest, I probably knew months before that morning that things were falling apart. But you tell yourself stories to get through the day. You pretend it's just work stress or bad timing or that she'll come around if you just stay patient. I'm Paul, 34. I've been working security for nearly a decade. Most nights, I stand by the entrance of a place called the Lantern, where the floor sticks to your boots and the neon signs flicker like they're about to die. My job isn't complicated. Keep the drunks from hurting each other, watch the corners, make sure nobody's trying to slip something into someone's drink. You'd think it would wear me down, but honestly, I never minded it. There's something simple about knowing exactly what's expected of you. You keep people safe, you go home. That's the thing, though. You get used to the quiet parts of your life. You get used to coming back to a place that smells like cheap candles and her shampoo. You get used to seeing the same face looking up when you open the door. It feels solid. It feels like maybe you've done at least one thing right. I met Eva behind the bar on a Thursday night when the place was half empty. She was pouring a vodka tonic for some kid who couldn't be older than 22, and she had this tired little smile like she'd already heard every line in the book. Her hair was tied up, a few strands sticking to her cheek. When she laughed, it was low and scratchy, the kind of sound that made you think she'd been screaming lyrics into a microphone hours before. I remember leaning my elbow on the counter, just watching her for a second. She caught me looking and raised an eyebrow like she was daring me to say something. I didn't. Not that night. It took me a few weeks of hanging around the bar longer than necessary before I finally asked her if she wanted to grab coffee after her shift. She looked at me for a second, like she was weighing whether I was worth her time, then shrugged and said, "Sure, but I'm not staying out all night. I've got work tomorrow." Of course, we did stay out. We sat in an all-night diner with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who kept giving us the side eye because we didn't order much. Eva told me about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everything about everyone. How she'd moved to the city because she was tired of being the girl who never did anything worth gossiping about. I told her about my dad, how he taught me to keep my mouth shut and my head clear, how that was probably why I ended up in security work. She said she liked that I didn't talk too much. Said it felt honest. It was easy in the beginning. So damn easy. We'd spend our nights off in her cramped kitchen, some half-finished bottle of cheap rum on the counter, her music playing just loud enough to rattle the cabinet doors. She liked this mix of old rock and electronic stuff with no lyrics, just endless beats and echoes. I didn't get it, but I liked how she'd close her eyes and sway, how she'd pull me up to dance even when I swore I was too tired. Her hands always smelled like mint and citrus from the bar. Sometimes she'd fall asleep on my chest, breathing slow and steady, and I'd think, yeah, this is it. This is what everyone's looking for. Just a quiet place to land. We moved in together about 6 months later. The place we rented wasn't much, a second-floor apartment with yellow walls and a heater that clanged all night in the winter. But it felt like ours. On the nights when I got off early, I'd bring her takeout, and we'd sit on the couch watching trashy reality shows she loved. She'd laugh and toss popcorn at the screen. And I'd pretend to hate it, but the truth was I couldn't remember being that content before her. We didn't have a big wedding. Neither of us cared about all that. Just a simple ceremony at the courthouse, her sister Lauren there as witness. Lauren was different, quieter, more careful with her words. Afterward, we went to a diner, ordered pancakes, and tried to pretend it was just another day. Eva wore a plain white dress and this grin that made me feel like I'd done something right for once. That first year was good. Really good. I'd come home, she'd be there. Some nights we'd cook together, or just sit around, her legs draped over mine, talking about nothing important. She'd joke about the idiots at the club, the guys who thought tipping big meant she'd go home with them. She always said she loved that I never acted jealous, that I trusted her. Maybe that's the worst part, knowing I did trust her. Knowing I didn't see it coming because I believed every word she said. It started to shift slowly. Little things. She'd come home later, her eyes already glassy from the after-shift drinks. She'd laugh too loud at her phone. She started calling me security in this mocking tone whenever I showed up to walk her home. The first time she did it in front of her coworkers, I tried to laugh it off. But it stuck. Like she wanted everyone to know she didn't take me seriously anymore. One night, she was sitting at the kitchen table, tapping through her messages. I asked her if she wanted to watch a movie, something we hadn't done in weeks. She didn't look up. Just said, "You pick." I don't care. So I picked something stupid and funny, hoping it would lighten the mood. Halfway through, she got up and went to the bedroom without saying a word. I sat there listening to the credits roll, feeling like I'd missed the part where everything fell apart. Another night, she didn't come home until dawn. When she finally walked in, she smelled like cologne that wasn't mine. I didn't ask. I didn't want to hear whatever excuse she'd come up with. I went to take a shower instead. Stood under the water until it turned cold, trying to figure out when exactly she'd stopped looking at me like I was enough. A week later, I caught her sitting in the break room with that same smug-looking guy, his hand on her leg, her face turned up to his, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. When she noticed me in the doorway, she didn't even look surprised. Just tilted her head like she was waiting for me to start some scene. "Paul," she said, her voice too calm. "Why do you always look like you're about to drag someone out by the throat? Relax. Relax." Like she hadn't just shown me exactly where I stood. I left without another word. Drove around until the sun came up, gripping the wheel so hard my palms hurt. When I finally went home, she was there, sitting on the couch, her eyes rimmed red like she'd been crying. I waited for her to say something. Anything. She didn't. Just stared at me like I was the one who'd ruined everything. That week, we didn't talk much. She'd sigh when I walked into the room, roll her eyes when I tried to ask if she was okay. And when she finally did speak, it was to tell me I was boring. Predictable. That she needed more. More what? I asked her. "What is it you think you're missing?" She just shrugged, like it wasn't even worth explaining. I remember thinking maybe I could fix it. Maybe if I showed her I still cared, she'd remember why she picked me in the first place. So I tried. God, I tried. I planned that dinner like it was going to save us. Bought her favorite raspberry pie. Cleaned the apartment. Cooked something halfway decent. Lit candles. Set the table. I waited for her to walk in and see it all, and maybe, just maybe, feel like I was still the man she used to look at with something like love. She came in, saw the table, and laughed. Not a warm laugh. The kind that makes you feel stupid for even trying. "Seriously? You think dinner is going to change anything?" I didn't yell. Didn't beg. Just said, "Sit down. Let's talk. Just for once, let's talk." She did. Picked at the pie. Didn't take more than a bite. When she finally stood up, she didn't look back at me. Just walked into the bedroom and shut the door. After that dinner, something in me shut off. Not all at once. More like a slow dimming I couldn't stop. I still came home every morning after my shift. I still left my boots by the door, put my keys in the same chipped bowl on the counter. But it felt like I was moving around inside someone else's life. She stopped pretending to care whether I was there or not. Some nights, she wouldn't come home at all. Other times, she'd walk in, her eyes glassy, and barely nod in my direction before disappearing into the bathroom for an hour. I started noticing little things. The way she left her phone face down, screen lighting up with messages she didn't bother to hide but never let me see. The smell of a different cologne on her skin. Once, I picked up the laundry basket she'd left in the hallway and found a receipt stuffed in the pocket of her jeans, dinner for two at some place I couldn't afford. I wish I could say I confronted her right then, demanded an explanation. But the truth is, I just stood there with that receipt in my hand, feeling something in my chest twist up tight. I tossed it in the trash and didn't mention it. Part of me knew there was nothing she could say that would make me feel any better. On nights when she wasn't home, I'd sit on our sagging couch and stare at the dark TV screen. Sometimes I'd catch myself listening for her key in the lock, even though I told myself I didn't care anymore. It's strange how fast you can go from feeling like a man to feeling like a piece of furniture someone forgot to throw out. I tried to distract myself. Picked up extra shifts. Helped the new bouncer learn the ropes. Spent a few hours after closing time cleaning up just so I wouldn't have to walk into that apartment and feel the weight of her absence. One morning, I came home early, hoping maybe she'd be there, sober enough to talk. The living room was empty, but her purse was on the coffee table. I almost turned back around, but something made me look. Her phone was lying there, unlocked, notifications rolling across the screen. I don't know what I thought I'd find. Maybe proof she was just out with friends. Maybe some excuse I could pretend to believe. But it was all right there in black and white. Last night was perfect. Wish I didn't have to leave so early. When can I see you again? He doesn't even ask where I go. It's like he's given up. I read them all. My hands were shaking, but my heart was steady. Too steady. Like it had finally stopped trying to beat for something that wasn't there. I put the phone down, sat on the couch and stared at the wall until the sun came up. When she finally came through the door, hair pulled back, sunglasses covering her eyes, I didn't move. She walked past me without a word, like we were two strangers who just happened to share a roof. That night, I talked to her sister Lauren. She was always the quiet one, the one who never seemed to understand why Eva needed all that attention. I called her because I didn't know who else to talk to. When she picked up, her voice was soft. "Paul? Everything okay?" "No," I said. "I don't think it is." I told her more than I'd ever planned to. About the dinners that never happened, the empty bed, the messages. She didn't interrupt me. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Paul?" she sighed. I'm not going to defend her. She's always been like this. Always needed to feel wanted by everyone. Even when she had someone who cared about her more than anyone else could. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted her to tell me I was imagining things. That there was still something to salvage. But Lauren didn't offer me any comfort like that. Maybe that's why I trusted her more than anyone. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I know you did everything you could. I remember one night, I came home and she was sitting on the floor of the bedroom, going through old boxes. She held up a photo of us from the first month we moved in together, her in that faded sweatshirt, me with my arm around her shoulders. She looked at it for a long time before setting it aside like it didn't matter anymore. You know, she said without looking up, I thought this was going to be different. I thought you'd be different. I didn't answer. I couldn't. She went back to sorting through the boxes, humming some song under her breath, and I walked out. Sometimes I'd find little notes she'd scribbled on scraps of paper. Shopping lists. Reminders. Once, a crumpled receipt with a message scrawled across the back. Can't keep pretending. I kept that one in my wallet for weeks. Don't ask me why. Maybe I thought if I read it enough times, it would hurt less. It never did. Then there were the nights she'd come home and try to act like nothing was wrong. She'd sit on the edge of the bed, kick off her shoes, look at me with that tired half-smile. How was work? She'd ask, like it mattered. Fine, I'd say. We'd sit there in silence, the kind that feels heavy enough to crush you. Sometimes she'd reach out, her hand hovering near mine, but she never touched me, never closed the gap. One morning, I got a text from her. Just 2 lines. Staying at Lauren's tonight. Don't wait up. I stared at it for a long time. I knew she wasn't at Lauren's. We both did. But I didn't reply. What was there left to say? Then came that final morning. The smell of coffee I hadn't brewed. The stranger's laugh echoing off the kitchen walls. Her sitting there like none of it mattered. Like I wasn't even real. That was the moment I realized whatever we'd had was already gone. I don't think you ever really plan the moment you decide you're done. It doesn't look how you expect. There's no screaming or breaking plates. No big speech. Just this sudden clarity that feels almost peaceful. That morning, after I saw them in the kitchen, I went straight to the bedroom. I could hear them behind me, her voice low and urgent, is trying to stay calm. I didn't care enough to listen. I opened the closet and pulled out her suitcase, the one we bought together before our first vacation. I set it on the bed and started folding her clothes. My hands moved steady, like I was packing up a stranger's things. I heard her footsteps in the doorway. She didn't come in right away. Just stood there, watching me. For a second, I thought she might start crying, might fall apart the way people do when they realize they've finally gone too far. But her voice was soft, almost annoyed. Paul, can you just stop for a second? Let me explain. I didn't look up. There's nothing to explain. It's not what you think. I laughed then, a short, humorless sound. It never is. She stepped closer. Please. I was going to tell you. It's just, you've been so distant. I folded another shirt, laid it on top of the others. And whose fault is that? Silence. I could feel her staring at the side of my face, waiting for me to meet her eyes. I didn't. The guy was still hovering in the hallway, shifting from foot to foot like he couldn't decide whether to run or apologize. I turned to him finally, and my voice came out flat. You can leave. He started to say something, maybe some half-formed excuse, but I cut him off. Now. He went. Didn't even look back at her. Eva pressed her hand to her mouth, like she was going to be sick. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not even a little. I zipped the suitcase and set it upright by the door. She was crying then, or trying to. The tears looked forced, the way you might cry in a bad play. Paul, she said, her voice cracking, don't do this. We can figure it out. Please. I finally looked at her. Really looked. And I felt nothing. Not hate. Not love. Just the dull understanding that I'd spent too long trying to save something she didn't care to keep. You need to go, I said. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a second, she looked like she might fight me. Like she'd try to argue her way back in. But she didn't. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand and picked up the suitcase. When she stepped past me, she smelled like the cologne I'd noticed before. That was all it took to remind me I was making the right choice. I watched her walk out of the apartment. She didn't look back. After she was gone, I locked the door. The silence pressed in all at once, heavier than I expected. I leaned my forehead against the wood and just stood there. I thought maybe I'd feel relief or rage or something big, but it was more like the air had cleared, like the noise was finally gone. I didn't sleep that day. I sat at the kitchen table where they'd been, staring at the coffee cups she hadn't bothered to wash. I thought about all the nights we'd sat here together, talking about nothing, about how easy it had been to believe we were happy. I must have stayed there for hours. At some point, I got up, opened the windows, and let the stale air out. I threw the coffee cups in the sink, took the sheets off the bed, gathered every scrap of her I could find, her hair ties, her perfume, the stupid little notes she used to leave me, and stuffed them in a box. I didn't trust myself to look through it all, just taped it shut and shoved it in the back of the closet. The next day, I went to work like nothing had happened. I didn't tell anyone, didn't want the questions or the pity. I stood at my post, nodding at the regulars, breaking up the occasional argument. For the first time in months, my head felt clear. People talk about heartbreak like it's this constant ache. For me, it was more like a numbness, a quiet I hadn't realized I needed. A week later, she started texting. First it was short messages. Can we talk? I'm sorry. Then longer ones. I don't know why I did this. I was scared. You were always so calm, and I felt like I was disappearing. I miss you. You were the only person who ever saw me for who I was. I read them all. Never replied. I don't know if that was kindness or cruelty. Maybe both. Sometimes at night, I'd sit on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her old photos. The ones where we looked so sure of each other. I kept waiting for the hurt to come back, to feel like I'd made a mistake. But it never did. Instead, there was this strange sense of finality. Like a door had shut, and I wasn't going to open it again. I saw Lauren once, a few weeks later. She stopped by the club after her shift. She didn't say much, just hugged me, tighter than I expected. She's sorry, she murmured against my shoulder. I nodded. I know. She doesn't expect you to forgive her. I won't, I said. Lauren looked at me then, her eyes sad but relieved, like she'd been waiting to hear that. One night, after another long shift, I came home to find the box I'd packed still there in the closet. I thought about throwing it out, about erasing every trace. But in the end, I left it. Not because I wanted it, just because it didn't matter anymore. That was the strangest part, realizing she didn't matter the way she used to. After she left, life didn't change as much as I thought it would. I still worked nights, still came home to the same creaking floors and humming refrigerator. The only difference was the quiet, and that turned out to be more of a relief than I ever expected. Some evenings, I'd get back while the sun was just starting to rise. I'd sit on the balcony with a cup of cheap coffee, watching the street wake up. Delivery vans rumbling past, kids dragging their backpacks, the bakery across the road pulling up the shutters. Ordinary things. Things I'd never paid much attention to when she was around. It's strange, the way routine can save you. I started making my own meals instead of bringing home takeout. Put on music while I cleaned. Nothing like her electronic playlists. Mostly old rock, the stuff my dad used to listen to. I found it helped to fill the air with something simple. At work, people stopped asking about her after the first couple weeks. Even the bartenders who'd known us both learned to stop saying her name. I was grateful for that. No pity, no forced small talk. Just the same old shifts, the same drunks who needed a steady hand on their shoulder. Every now and then, I'd catch myself wondering where she was. Whether she'd moved in with that guy, or found someone else altogether. I didn't feel jealous. Just curious in the detached way you might think about an old classmate. Like she'd become part of a story I'd already finished reading. I kept expecting the sadness to hit me in waves, to knock me flat when I least expected it. But it never came like that. It was more of a dull ache that eased a little more each day. A steady settling into the fact that whatever we did wasn't coming back. Then, about a month after she left, I ran into her by accident. It was early evening. I'd stopped by the grocery store on my way home, picking up a few things for the week, coffee, bread, a couple of frozen dinners. I was standing in line behind an older woman counting out change when I heard her voice. Paul. It wasn't loud. Just enough that I knew instantly who it was. I turned around and there she stood, holding a small basket. She looked different. Not worse, exactly. Just tired. Her hair pulled back in a messy knot, dark circles under her eyes. She was wearing the same coat I'd bought her last winter. For a second, neither of us spoke. It was like time folded in on itself, and I was back in that kitchen doorway, watching everything fall apart. She swallowed hard. Can we talk? I nodded, because I didn't feel any reason to refuse. We stepped out of line and walked toward the corner near the exit, out of the way of people coming and going. She didn't look at me right away, just stared down at the tile floor like she was trying to remember how to start. I'm not here to. I don't know. Ask you to take me back, she said finally. Her voice was hoarse. I needed you to know I'm sorry. I waited, letting her talk. It's been different, she went on, voice trembling. Being on my own. I thought I wanted all that excitement, all that attention. But it turns out, when you get it, people expect something in return. They expect you to be grateful, to be available. She looked up then, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her without any performance in her eyes. Just tiredness. Regret. I thought I was missing something with you, she whispered. But you were the only person who never made me feel like I had to prove anything. And I threw that away. I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't have words, but because I didn't trust myself to say them kindly. She took a shaky breath. I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve that. But you should know, you were the best person I ever had in my life. I looked at her then. Really looked. The woman I loved wasn't standing there anymore. Just someone who'd made her choice, same as I had. I believe you, I said finally. My voice was calm. And I'm glad you told me. Her eyes welled up. You really don't think there's any way back from this? I shook my head. I don't. I'm not angry anymore. But I'm not going to pretend we can go back to something that wasn't working. She nodded, blinking fast, like she was trying to keep herself from breaking. I guess I knew you'd say that. Neither of us moved for a moment. People brushed past, the automatic doors sliding open and closed, cold air drifting in. I hope you find what you're looking for, I said. She let out a shaky breath. You too. Then she turned and walked away, the plastic basket still clutched in both hands. I watched her go until she disappeared into the canned goods aisle. I paid for my groceries, drove home, put everything away like it was any other day. That night, sitting at the kitchen table, I thought about the way her voice had sounded. Not pleading, just honest. And I realized that was the first real conversation we'd had in months. It didn't change anything, but it felt like an ending I could live with. After that evening in the grocery store, she didn't text again. Maybe she knew it wouldn't change anything, or maybe she'd finally run out of ways to explain herself. Either way, the silence was a relief. Like a door had clicked shut for good. I settled into my routines the way you do when there's no one else to plan around. The apartment stayed tidier without her things scattered everywhere. No high heels by the door, no perfume bottles crowding the bathroom shelf. At first, the emptiness felt too big, like the walls were pressing outwards, trying to swallow me up. But little by little, it started to feel like space I could breathe in. I picked up extra shifts at the club, not because I needed the money, but because it helped to have somewhere to be. The nights blurred together, checking IDs, breaking up arguments before they turned into something uglier, watching the same faces get drunk on the same cheap drinks. People came and went, but nothing really changed. That was what I liked about it. Predictable, steady. Sometimes I'd see couples in the corner booths, women laughing too loud, men leaning close, saying whatever they thought would work. I used to wonder what it was they thought they'd found, whether any of them had something real or were all just acting out the same tired play. I try not to be cynical, but it was hard not to be after everything. One night, a coworker asked me if I was seeing anyone. I shook my head, and he made some joke about setting me up with his sister's friend. I laughed it off, not because I couldn't imagine dating again, but because the idea of sharing my space with someone felt like more trouble than it was worth. I started cooking more. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep me from living on frozen meals. I bought a cheap set of weights and started working out before my shifts. I read a few books I'd been meaning to get to, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything to anyone. One Saturday morning, I woke up before my alarm. The sun was coming through the blinds in thin gold stripes. I lay there for a while, listening to the city waking up outside. Cars moving down the street, a dog barking somewhere down the block. It hit me then how quiet it all felt. Not lonely, just simple. I got up, made coffee, sat at the table where she'd once sat across from me. The table didn't feel haunted anymore. Just a place to drink my coffee, read the paper, start my day. I thought about her now and then, but not in the way you might think. It wasn't regret. More like looking back on a movie you watched a long time ago. You remember the big scenes, but the details start to fade. Every so often, I'd run into someone who knew both of us, a bartender from the club, an old neighbor, and they'd ask how she was. I'd shrug. Haven't talked to her. And that was the truth. I don't think she was a bad person. She just wanted things I couldn't give her, and I wanted something she couldn't be. Maybe in another life, we'd have figured it out. But this wasn't that life. There's this thing people say, that time heals everything. I don't know if I believe that. Time doesn't heal much. It just moves you further away from the place where it hurt. Some days, you look back and it stings a little. Most days, you just don't think about it at all. If you asked me now whether I'd do it all over again, I'm not sure what I'd say. I don't regret trying. I don't regret believing in her. But I don't miss it, either. That's the part that surprised me the most. How quickly you learn to live without something you thought you couldn't lose. A couple of months after we split, I came home to find an envelope tucked into my mailbox. No return address, just my name in her handwriting. I carried it upstairs, turned it over in my hands a few times before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No big speech, just a few lines in blue ink. I hope you're okay. I'm sorry for all the hurt. I really did love you, even if it didn't look like it. Eva. I read it twice, folded it back up, and set it in the drawer with the other things I wasn't sure what to do with. That was the last I ever heard from her. People want a clean ending, a big moment of closure. But real life doesn't usually give you that. Sometimes you just wake up one day and realize you're okay. Not better, not worse, just okay. I don't tell this story because I need anyone's sympathy. I'm not interested in pity. I tell it because it happened. Because sometimes you think you're the one holding everything together, And it turns out you were the only one trying. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can love someone with everything you have and still end up alone. And that doesn't mean you did it wrong. It just means they weren't meant to stay. These days, I still work at the club, still come home to a quiet apartment. I've got a couple of good friends, a steady routine, and no one waiting up for me. And for now, that's enough. Maybe someday I'll meet someone else. Maybe I won't. Either way, I'm not in a rush. I've learned that peace isn't about having everything you want. Sometimes it's just about having less of what you don't need. And that's the part one never saw coming, that the emptiness could feel like freedom.